Vertical Raise is the premier online donation platform, utilizing email, text messaging, and social media campaigns to exponentially increase the reach of your fundraiser. With detailed tracking and the complete personalization of every page, Vertical Raise provides an easy system that works. Our experienced representatives have made us the most effective fundraising platform available. We look forward to the opportunity in helping elevate your program to the next level and reaching your goals. Visit online or call today.
This is a Queen Bee Radio High School sports presentation.
Welcome to another edition of the Queen Bee Radio High School Sports Roundup, presented by Vertical Raise Milwaukee. We have successfully braved two of the biggest snowstorms that we've had this winter. Well, the only two snowstorms that we really had, and it's still disrespectfully cold outside, but we are back on track as far as our high school sports coverage and schedule go. And I'm joined by our Galena truther, Steve Prestegard, to talk about some boys basketball, where Steve, on Tuesday night, you had a battle for first place in the Six Rivers West between Potosi and Highland. Probably not the game that at the beginning of the season that we would anticipate being a battle for first place, but Highland playing really well. Potosi obviously living up to their ranking so far this season. Potosi did come away with the win on Tuesday night. Talk a little bit about what you saw from that game Tuesday night and your impression of both teams.
You're by the way being a little premature about the next snowstorm because I've seen the weekend forecast. But be that as it may, the game Tuesday night was, both coaches talked about they didn't want to commit a lot of turnovers. They did in both cases, and I said at the half that I think turnovers was a dominant issue or a dominant statement, or if you will, a dominant theme of the two halftime conversations, and it didn't really get better at the half. The one thing that Potosi was able to do last night was rebound successfully against a team that, for not having a lot of surprises, not a size actually, has been pretty successful in rebounding this year in terms of Highland. Highland's problem was they were kind of harassed into poor shooting, and they didn't rebound very well, and they caught the ball up too much, so that was kind of their thing. Potosi had, after a first half that had, I believe, a 12-0 run each direction, for each team. But the thing in the second half that allowed Potosi to pull away turns out was Gavin Wonderland. He only had 4 points at the half. He had 20 in the second half. And finally, Potosi kind of got their offense going. I have to think, although I didn't talk to him afterwards, that Mike Uppett was pretty happy with his defense. He said that his defense before the game, he felt his defense needed to be more gritty than they've been at this point. And I think they pretty much achieved that, which is a good thing because, you can have bad nights shooting the ball. You can, have nights where you feel like you're dribbling a cube instead of a basketball. And that may have been last night, but, defense travels wherever you go and all those sorts of things. And I would say that they have to be pretty pleased with their defense last night.
Yeah, and Highland, when I saw them against Cassville last week, they love to get points in transition. They love to force turnovers, go on those fast breaks, and get some easy buckets. That's kind of their MO, at least from the games that we've been able to see. And they are, very athletic and very fast. Are the Highland Cardinals. So I was very curious to see how that game was going to pan out. And with Potosi getting the win, they now have a 2-game cushion at about the halfway point of the season in the Six Rivers West, with the 2-game lead over River Ridge, Schulzburg, and Highland now. Those three teams with identical 4-2 records, which makes things interesting coming down the home stretch. You just hope that, for Potosi's sake, if they can stay healthy and just maintain that dominance, they should easily take care of business in the Six Rivers West, holding on to that 2-game lead. Now, looking at the SWAL, we had some. Oh, go ahead.
Keep in mind, real quick though, that Friday, Potosi, which only beat River Ridge by 1 point the first time they played,
that's correct.
They get them again Friday night. So, this whole scenario could blow up if River Ridge pulls off the win on Friday. But I think we kind of thought that was going to be the case all along, that this is kind of Potosi's conference to lose. And at this point, even though they've had the close win over River Ridge, and they only beat Cassville by 3.
Mhm.
They're still doing what it takes to win, basically.
Yep, they're a free throw and a bucket away from being, a 4-2 team themselves, and that makes the conference a whole lot different if that had turned out the way it did, but that's not what's happened. They are undefeated in conference play, but they do have River Ridge, as you said, and we have that game on the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel on Friday night. Potosi hosting River Ridge, a big matchup in the Six Rivers West. Let's move into the SWAL, where we had some interesting games on Tuesday night. The one that I had, Cuba City and basketball. Boy, this was a crazy basketball game where Cuba City jumped out to an 11-2 lead. Basketball then countered with a 12-0 run to take the lead. Cuba City went into halftime on a run that made it 32 or 33-24 at the half. Basketball then goes on a 7-0 run to begin the second half, and it was back and forth the remainder of the game. Basketball got into foul trouble, and they put Cuba City at the line. And anytime that Cuba City would make free throws, it seemed like basketball would counter with a three-pointer. And with about 2 minutes left to go, it was a 62-61 ball game. And the crowd in basketball was electric, because I think it has to be close to, 20, 30 years or something like that since basketball has beaten Cuba City in boys basketball, or been able to sneak away a win. But Cuba City was able to get it done at the free throw line. Tyson Richard in the second half, 10 of 11 free throw shooting down the stretch, and those free throws the biggest difference. And talking with Coach Tanner Sheevy during our post game interview, he said something that's very interesting, and I don't know if this is necessarily a Jerry Pettigrew-ism. If anyone's ever heard him say this, and maybe there's a quote that they had stolen it from, but Coach Sheevy said that winning is a skill, and that his team is trying to find ways to win because they've had some close losses. You had the classic game that they had against Iowa Grant. They had a 3-point loss to Southwestern. It feels like Cuba City's in the mix, but just still trying to figure out a way to come away with wins. They're competing, but they're not necessarily always winning, and that's where I think Coach Sheevy was alluding to. And they have a big matchup coming up on Friday night against Darlington, a rematch where the second round of conference play comes in. We know that Mineral Point and Darlington are at the top of the conference. Mineral Point in first, Darlington at second. But Southwestern in that number 3 spot, tied with Cuba City with a 4-3 record, although Southwestern has the head-to-head win. The SWAL is turning out how I anticipated it to be, but I do think that the games themselves in the conference seems to be ultra competitive. And, most of these games, especially in the middle part of the conference, it's a coin flip. It just depends who's hot on what night.
Right. And I mean, we kind of knew that was going to be the case with Mineral Point and Darlington. I think in Cuba City's case, people were pretty much underestimating how inexperienced that team is. That, this is not a team that has Max Lucy or the Rosencrantzes or Cody Hotaker or a lot of other guys from the teams that have been as good as they've been the last few years. So that's the sort of thing that you kind of tend to forget a little bit coming into the season. So that phrase about, winning being a skill, how many times have we seen Cuba City in past years hang around toward the end of a game and then do those things that they need, the big shot, hitting the free throws, getting the big rebound, and these guys on this team don't really have that experience in doing that because they wouldn't have been out on the floor when those instances were taking place. So I guess it's, not too surprising that Cuba City is having some issues with that just because of how inexperienced they are. Southwestern, well, I mean, we know what their story is. We've mentioned it all kinds of times, is that they are, they typically have difficulty because of how tough their conference is in the regular season. Then they get to the postseason, but maybe they're a little better than that at this point this season. We'll see when they take on, Darlington and Mineral Point the second time that they play them. Certainly over the years, it's true that playing at Southwestern has been a difficult thing for other teams in the conference. So a couple of years ago, there was a big game that I did, Mineral Point and Southwestern at the end of the season. Mineral Point, I think, had a pretty deep postseason run that year, and Southwestern was playing for third place in the conference, as I remember, and Southwestern won that game. So, Southwestern is not an easy place to play for a variety of reasons, and it's possible that the postseason run that we always enjoy for Southwestern might be starting a little early, possibly, especially in a conference that, other than the top two teams, is relatively even after that.
Yeah, Mineral Point already has a win at Southwestern. That was one of the early games in the Swall this year, but Southwestern goes to Mineral Point. We'll have that game on Friday night on 97.7 Country WGR, in addition to that matchup between Cuba City and Darlington, a rematch between the Cubans and the Redbirds. The first matchup, I remember seeing that game on the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel, and Cuba City, had Darlington, on the ropes in the first half, played very well with them. I believe Cuba City even went into the half with the lead, but obviously, as we know with Darlington, there's a lot of firepower, and they have a very deep roster, and they flex their muscle in the second half. And as we were mentioning with Cuba City, the combination of the lack of experience of the players on the floor, coupled with a new head coach and a new system. Teams in January are certainly different in November, and I think like anything else, anytime Cuba City and Darlington play, I don't think it necessarily matters what the records are. These kids know each other; they're neighbors. In some cases they might even be cousins. In some cases, but yeah, Cuba City and Darlington, it's going to be a good matchup. Regardless of what the record is, and we'll have that game on Friday night as well on Super Hits 106. Let's move into the SWC. Platteville in first place in the conference with the 4-0 undefeated record, followed by River Valley and Dodgeville with identical 3-1 records. Steve, you had the chance to see Platteville at the Pfizer Forum when they took on Monona Grove, and kind of the looking at the SWC, I don't know what to make of this conference, because I thought Lancaster was, playing good basketball at the end of December, but they're now back under 500. Dodgeville, I don't know if we kind of figured that they'd be down a little bit, but now they're just a game back. I think Platteville, just based on their resume, is probably the superior team, and it's their conference to lose. But some interesting teams in that middle part of the conference.
Yeah, definitely. I think River Valley is somewhat overachieving at this point. Sometimes in these, because you look at the records, and Platteville is the only team that has a winning regular season record. Sometimes it's not necessarily the number of wins you get, but which wins you get. The winning in the conference as opposed to non-conference games. But certainly, remember, Platteville started the season with losses to Mineral Point and Darlington, and that's about as difficult as you can come up with to start a season. That game, the loss to Monona Grove in Milwaukee, ended a 7-game winning streak. Well, now they're back on the right side of things. That Dodgeville game is going to be extremely interesting, because Dodgeville's biggest loss to graduation, literally, was Chandler Batchelor. You do not replace a 7'2" kid.
You mean Dodgeville doesn't have a bunch of 7'2" kids lined up, ready to play basketball? They don't have a surplus of those?
No, I'm sure Matt McGraw would love to have another one or a couple, but the funny thing about that is that Chandler Batchelor actually made Dodgeville play differently than they were used to playing, because for many years, and I mean, this goes back like 20 years, 30 years actually, Dodgeville, and it started when Chuck Tank was the coach, was a team that would run and shoot threes and press. They got him to state a couple of times. And they've always kind of played like that until the last couple of years with Batchelor, when they started to play more of a half-court style. And, it could be that when they don't have the kind of size that they used to have, they have, 6'4", 6'5" guys, but they don't have, don't have a 7-2 kid, and so there may be a transition issue of going back to more of a style that they're used to playing. Perhaps that may be part of the issue. Maybe we'll find out Friday, because that is a huge game, certainly, with Platteville at 4-0 and then Dodgeville at 3-1. The other team that I've talked to other coaches about this, the team that I think is maybe a little bit of a surprise, perhaps not in a good way, although maybe they're just off to a really slow start, is Prairie du Chien. Platteville beat Prairie du Chien in Prairie, but it wasn't an easy game. I think they won by like 15 or so. And you always get a tough game against Prairie du Chien, whether they are a very good team or not. And even though they're sitting there at 1-3, they've only won 4 games this year. They got beat Tuesday night by Decorah of Iowa. But I have this weird feeling that Prairie du Chien is going to have some kind of impact on the race up above them. And not quite sure where or how or anything like that. But you just have that kind of feeling. And Prairie du Chien is a team that really seriously backloads their schedule. Hardly plays at all, before the new year. And they got hit by graduation pretty hard also, but I wouldn't be surprised if Prairie du Chien, I don't know that they're going to win the conference or contend for the conference, but they could end up having an impact at the end of the season.
Yeah, that's a conference I'm going to have my eye on quite a bit during this second half of the season, because that middle of the pack, like I said, I think Platteville's going to be the top team in the SWC. I mean, their losses are to Darlington, Mineral Point, and Monona Grove on an NBA floor. So, I mean, Platteville's, certainly earned the right to be at the top of the conference, and I think that it is their conference to lose, but it'll be interesting to see how Dodgeville, plays against Platteville coming up on Friday night. You'll have that one on Extreme 107.1. Let's briefly go through some of the other conferences that we kind of have our eye on. Six Rivers East, Barneveld and Pecatonica, 5-1 records. Argyle right behind them at 4-1. Kind of shaping out to be a very interesting conference. We'll see how the rest of that plays out. In the Ridge and Valley, North Crawford still undefeated at 13-0, but Ithaca right behind them with an 11-1 overall record, 1 game back in the conference standings. And looking at our friends in Illinois in the NUI West, how fitting. Galena Truther, the Galena Pirates are in first place in that conference. Scales Mound in the middle of the pack with a 2-2 conference record, although their overall record is 14-5. So they have more wins than Galena overall at 13-7. Looking at those 3 conferences, Steve, what kind of stands out to you about the teams in those areas?
Well, I'm not sure that people thought the North Crawford was going to be as good as they are, and here's a tip for people who don't have anything to do on Thursday. North Crawford goes to Southwestern. And that is going to be a really interesting game, I think, because it could be, underline that word, a pregame or a postseason preview, in the sense that how many times have we seen a team from this part of the state, from the southern southwest part of the state, Southwestern being an example, or somebody like that, take on the Ridge and Valley champion and beat them. And North Crawford looks really good, but what Southwestern's capable of typically. So that's going to be a really interesting game on Thursday. The NUI West, I'm not quite sure that anybody thought Scales Mound was going to be in 4th place, although it's, the season is far from over as far as that goes. Galena, when you have a kid like Cooper Glasgow, one kid who's a big scoring machine can make a huge amount of difference. And, they've had some issues in their non-conference schedule, but they're winning the right games, which is to say their conference games. East Dubuque's been pretty good this year. Warren has been, they have a below 500 overall record, but they're 2-1 in the conference. And you have to wonder if Scales Mound is maybe just kind of suffering from the effect. First off, they're all rivals, so regardless of records, but Scales Mound's been to state back-to-back seasons. They are underlined on everybody's schedule every game that they play. So it's kind of like the line about the team that wins the Super Bowl has 17 Super Bowls the next year. And you have
Hmm.
to wonder if if they're just getting everybody's best effort, basically, basically in Scales Mound. But we have them coming up next Wednesday, I believe, or one of these Wednesdays
Yeah.
coming up. And so that's going to be an interesting game to watch. Also, they'll be playing River Ridge.
Yep, that will be next week on Wednesday, the 24th. That'll be on Extreme 1071. So, looking at the overall landscape in boys basketball, we're about the halfway point, especially in conference play at this point on the Wisconsin side. What's the biggest surprise to you so far at this point in the season?
Honestly, it's the fact that it took until this long to have no weather postponements. I mean,
Hmm.
there's that year a few years ago where I remember John Hoke, then the Lancaster athletic director, saying that there was a game the Lancaster was playing. It was either Potosi or Platteville. They had to schedule it 5 times. There
Yeah.
was a game, Platteville went 3 weeks without playing a game because every bad weather day happened to be on a game night, So that's one of the things. I don't know that other than maybe North Crawford and Galena, I don't know that there are particularly surprised teams at this point. Ithaca's had a very good year also, as you pointed out. But, we're at the semester break, basically, and there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been decided yet. And nobody is running away with any conference at this point.
Hmm.
So I think it's going to be a really interesting second half for that reason.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily one team that's kind of surprising to me, but just maybe more of an observation, and this certainly applies to the girls' side of things too. But free throw shooting overall, it has been so decisive, and in a lot of cases, in some of the games that I've done, and feel free to give your input on this as well. There's been some bad free throw shooting, especially in clutch situations where, teams are, sometimes well below 50% at the line in, those 50-50, type games. And, coaches will consistently say, it's something that we work on in practice. We shoot X number of free throws during practice in each game. And, when you talk with coaches about it, anecdotally, it's like, we can practice it, as much as we can in the gym, but there's sometimes no real true simulation to, be that clutch at the line, when there's, an opposing crowd, chanting and making noise and distracting you and stuff like that. Just free throw shooting overall has been a bit of a surprise in how critical, the sometimes lack of success at the free throw line has cost teams. And, those losses sometimes compound each other. Cuba City is probably one of those examples, where, you get a couple buckets to go your way, their conference record looks drastically different. That maybe they're in that third place spot, over Southwestern, in the SWAL. You get one bucket or a couple free throws to go your way, and the dynamic, changes drastically. It's kind of like the 2-point conversion that we talked about between Lancaster and Platteville in football. How huge was that 2-point conversion as far as determining the conference, the seeding, and stuff like that? It feels like this is just one of those years where free throw shooting is going to be at the premium.
Well, this is not, unfortunately, a new theme. In fact, I remember last year when I was doing a couple of Scales Mound boys games, they were shooting 72% of the team as a team. That was the best by far of any team that I was covering at that point last year. I did a game a couple of years ago between, I think it was Highland and Shullsburg. If I remember right, Shullsburg was shooting 49% from the line. They were shooting better than Highland was. I think they were at 43%. You talk to both of the coaches, and you can talk to any coach. They will always say the same thing. And you said it, that they all practice. They practice in the middle of practice free throws in the middle of practice when people are kind of gassed, to try to simulate an end game situation. And, some teams probably shoot just fine in practice. And then in the game, it's a little different because it's not just about the physical process of shooting free throws. It's what's upstairs also that you have to blot everything out and hit the shot. It's kind of crazy if you look at some of the stats. There are a fair number of players who are shooting better from three than from the foul line.
Yep.
Ponder that one for a second.
Yeah.
There's and coaches also talk about getting to the foul line, which basically means either getting the ball inside one way or another, either passing it inside to one of your big guys or driving the lane also to try to create a foul. And but as far as, and I think it's probably the sort of thing that it makes coaches' hair either turn gray or fall out, is looking at, look, we practice this during practice every single day, and some kids after practice, and yet you get into a game and there it is. And it's got to be mystifying for everybody as to why it's taking place. And as I said, it's not a recent trend. It's been going on for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even the best teams, when you look at the team stats, most of the teams at the top of the conference, they're shooting maybe just above 60% at the line, which is not that much higher than 50-50 at the line. So yeah, it's one of those things where I just have a hunch, especially down the home stretch of the season and in those postseason games, free throw shooting is going to be at a premium and something that we'll kind of have to keep tabs on to see which teams get better at the free throw line as the season goes along. So that's kind of the surprise and something that I'll have my eye on during the second half of the season, not just on the boys' side, but on the girls' side as well. And we'll have the girls' side coming up in just a little bit. Steve will join me for that as well. We got the Subs.com highlight reel coming up next. We'll have more on the Queen Bee Radio High School Sports Roundup presented by Vertical Raised Milwaukee after this on YouTube and SoundCloud.
Check out Subs.com. Subs is Southwest Wisconsin's go-to supplement store. Find all your favorite supplement brands at the best prices from local people. Fuel your fitness journey. Subs.com, your go-to supplement store with locations in Fennimore and Dubuque.
This week's highlight reel is presented by Subs.com.
Ball goes on Nelson Hahn, her first team second. Inbound from Morgan. Long three-pointer, head of the wheel, and that starts the party here tonight. She'll go to the free throw line, right junction, and a handoff for Nimitz, who goes into the paint. Now a spin down the right lane line, and a Midwest One bank shot gets the bucket. Does Cassie Nimitz. 5-0 Lancaster. 2-second free throw. Martin, that one rolls all over and drains. So Martin salvages the trip to the line. It's 8-0 Lancaster. 7:45, and now a takeaway layup. The steal by Annie Martin, and the layup. Bob's inside, bobbling, collecting, bouncing back out right corner for Morgan. Left-handed dribble into the right, mid-post shot up, bounces all over and drains. Lancaster leading Fennimore, non-conference girls hoops here on the X Extreme 1071, x1071.com, and the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. 3-ball, head of the wheel, splash. Pass right side from Zink. Now leaves down low. French, spinning, shooting, making, and we're tied at 17. 1:55 to go first half, 20-19. Lancaster, who's led by 10, has not trailed in this one. It's been tied since then. Now they trail at 3-ball, head of the wheel. Mark does Kenny, rebound down for Cassie Nimitz, and her pass telegraphed and picked off by Kenny. She'll go left to the lane line, working on Nimitz. It gets the layup. Midwest One bank shot, simply better. Backing 2-point deposit. Wing. Gracie Nelson working on Weber. Gets the screen to the top of the key. Toss left wing for Briley Zink. Launches the three and answers. Briley Zink's third of the season.
Tipped and grabbed up top, and then tipped again and stolen this time. And back the other way, taking it in is Dawson Weber. Over at the right wing, driving is Smith, lays it up and in, and ties the ball game. And Bush Insurance, a proud partner of Pekin Insurance Company. Quick pass in the lane, laid up and in, and a foul. Back out to Uppana. Wonderland left wing, fires it inside, and the turnaround shot is good. And edge underneath, now the left wing three, that doesn't go. for up and up, but they get the rebound back. Now Weber at the foul line, and he puts it in. 22-13. Messer hands it behind him to Dreschmeyer. Dreschmeyer right at the point. His pass tipped in the air. Grabbed somehow underneath, and then the three from the corner for Terrell. Bullseye. I think that's the first three in the entire ball game. Terrell drives into the lane to the far baseline, and then a quick pass into the lane, laid up underhand and a miss, and a rebound is up and good. Left side of the lane is Wonderland. Spin move, puts it up and in. They might have was one bang shot. And left to the point is Edge. Right of the point post. Back to Edge. Into the corner to Wonderland. He'll put it up for three from there. Bullseye! And there's the first three of the game for Potosi. And up top it's Smith. And Smith will put up an NBA three and make it! Wow! Isaiah Groom back in the game, pass at the left wing. And over to the corner from Wonderland. Driving the baseline is up and good. Post, now he passes to the corner. Fake shot, inside it goes, and then back out. And the top of the silo, three! Bullseye! Sure. And Wonderland at the right wing. Now we'll back up, now we'll go forward. Into the lane, lays it up, backdoor and in! Up top, it's Terrell for three off the back of the rim. Ball is tipped into the backcourt and grabbed by Wonderland, who slams it in! And it's 53-42 with 2:02 remaining.
Looking for a checking account with no monthly requirements or service charge? People's State Bank's People's Checking Account is just what you're looking for. This account includes free debit card, online and mobile banking, bill pay, and much more at no cost to you. You heard that right. No cost to you. We're your local community bank ready to serve you. People's State Bank. Member FDIC.
Back on the Queen Bee Radio High School Sports Roundup presented by Vertical Raise Milwaukee. It's now time to talk about girls basketball. I'm rejoined by Steve Prestegard, our Galena truther. And the game that you have coming up, it's a big one on Thursday night, the SWC Prairie du Chien at Platteville on Extreme 107.1. Looking at the SWC conference standings, it's the 1 and 2 teams. Platteville in the one spot with a 4-0 conference record. Prairie du Chien right behind them at 3-1. Dodgeville also 3-1 at the top half of that conference. Big matchup to decide how the conference is going to shake out the rest of the way, Steve.
Most definitely. You look at Platteville's overall record, which is 9-5. Keep in mind that they lost their first 4 games of the season to 3 ranked teams, including Mineral Point and Darlington, who are obviously having great years in the Swell. The other thing as far as Platteville goes is that they came into this season having to replace a lot of people. They had, I believe, actually they had no starters coming back. They only had 2 players who were part of the rotation coming back from last year. And it took them a while to get things going. But when they played Prairie du Chien the first time, it was the first time that things had completely gotten going. They had, they were leaving Prairie du Chien down for 1 shot. They were getting timely shots. They were rebounding well, and they were forcing turnovers. So that was the best they had played by far to that point. Obviously, it was their first win. Then they turned around the next week and beat Dodgeville and played even better. And, they've only lost 1 game since that 4-game losing streak. So they are right now playing about as well as anybody is in girls basketball at this point. Having said that, you have to think Prairie du Chien is not happy about how that first meeting occurred. And the weird part about it is, even though the game is in Platteville, every once in a while, there are some teams who play better on the road than they play at home. And this is one of those possible circumstances where that could end up being the case. It depends basically if Platteville is able to play as well as they did the first time and kind of able to harass Prairie du Chien, which kind of interestingly has actually as young a team or close to as young a team as Platteville has. So it's going to be a really fun game tomorrow night or Thursday night.
Yeah, Prairie du Chien at Platteville, that'll be on Extreme 1071 and X1071.com. Another matchup to keep an eye on in the SWC. I'm very intrigued by this matchup. Lancaster at Dodgeville, just because Dodgeville had to win in overtime at Lancaster earlier this season, and the 3 and 4 teams in the SWC going head to head, a big matchup in that game as well. So yeah, Thursday night could be a huge piece of the puzzle, so to speak, in figuring out how the SWC is going to shape out. Let's look at the SWAL now. Cuba City at the top of the conference with a 6-0 record. Mineral Point right behind them at 5-1. Darlington at 5-1, having lost to Mineral Point in the last week. And Fennimore right there in the mix too, 4-2. The SWAL for the girls' side has been very, very intriguing. I did see Cuba City play at Fennimore earlier this season. Cuba City came away with a pretty convincing win over the Golden Eagles there. So, Cuba City, obviously, at the top of the conference, and deservedly so. They are ranked in the latest WisSports.net poll. They've been ranked throughout the duration of the season, but Mineral Point right there too, 11-2 overall on their record. I don't know how much we anticipated the Pointers being at the top of the conference, but they've been a fun surprise, and really from Cuba City through Fennimore, those 4 teams, any one of those teams could really be poised for a deep postseason run, depending on how the seedings shake out.
Well, yeah, you're looking at 10 wins, 11 wins, 9 wins, and 10 wins as far as overall record goes with those teams. Fennimore kind of, in retrospect, probably figured that they have a good year this year because they had their top 2 returning players, and in a combination you like to have your point guard and your big inside player. They had some people they had to replace after that, obviously, but Cuba City has obviously, kind of as far as the program goes, with Jason Derby replacing Jeff Pastina, kind of picked up where they've left off. Darlington's on a pretty good run right now as well. And even though Mike Keys isn't the coach, well, actually, the funny thing with Mineral Point, and this goes back all the way to the last time, or actually the previous time to the last time that they won state, when Mitch Wainwright was the coach. He ended up retiring, and they had a good year after him with, I think it was Matt Austin, and then he retired because he got the principal job, and Mike Keys came in. He did a really good job, 2 trips to state, and now they have a new coach whose name escapes me, but they just insert new coach and things go, just pick up where they left off. That's not usually the way it works. No. You know that typically there's a big transition from one coach to the other. But Mineral Point's kind of like a machine right now, really. Just insert new coach, insert players. If you have a player named Lindsay, that seems to help. And they're just really rolling right now.
Yep, a big matchup coming up on Thursday night, Fennimore at Cuba City. And then we also see Darlington at Riverdale. Iowa Grant is at Mineral Point. Southwestern at Basketball. Those are the SWAL matchups on Thursday night. But Fennimore at Cuba City, a big piece of that puzzle. Again, Cuba City convincing over Fennimore earlier in the season. We'll see if Fennimore can maybe pull off the upset on Cuba City in Cuba City. Fennimore coming off a win on Monday night against Lancaster in a non-conference matchup. Let's look at the Six Rivers West. Man, this is a really, really crazy conference. You have Highland and Belmont with identical 3-1 records. Highland got the head-to-head win against Belmont in Belmont earlier this season. River Ridge in the mix with a 3-2 conference record. They beat Highland at River Ridge in a game that we had last week, where when we talked about in our first segment with boys basketball about free throws, I'm sure Coach Terrell was having his girls work on free throw shooting, because they shot 10 of 28 as a team against River Ridge in that first matchup, and that was arguably the deciding factor in the game, because River Ridge was fouling Highland early and often in that first half. In that first half, it was 4 of 16 at the line as a team for the Cardinals, and a big reason why River Ridge was able to come away with the win. But I'm looking at this conference, Steve, and we mentioned Highland, Belmont, River Ridge, Schulzberg. They're 4-10. They've had the injury bug. They had some weird things happen with them at the beginning of the season. I suspect that the second half is going to bring them better luck. But those 4 teams, I mean, it feels like it could be a coin flip as far as who wins what game. And a big piece of that puzzle gets figured out on Thursday night as well. River Ridge at Belmont. We'll have that one on Super Hits 106 and the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. It feels like it's one of those, a River Ridge loss pretty much eliminates them, from the conference picture, but a River Ridge win, they're back in the mix for the very top of the conference.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting year over there when A beats B, B beats C, and C beats A, and and again, there's a whole lot of time left. I had another coach tell me that they thought that Highland, who was not really that highly thought of at the start of the year, was a dark horse pick as far as he was concerned. That has certainly panned out to this point. Belmont, as things have turned out, they've been a little slower starting, I think, than people kind of thought that was going to be the case, considering that, okay, yeah, they lost 5 players to graduation, but they had 5 back for a team that went 10 deep last year. So, that's one of those kind of hard to figure sorts of things. Schulzberg, just 4 wins, but 2 of them were conference wins. So obviously, as the phrase goes, they're winning the right games. That you're going to get a lot answered, or maybe not, after Thursday night's game, between the games that are being played.
Yeah, very interested to see how that conference shakes out. And again, on Thursday night, River Ridge at Belmont. We'll have that one on Super Hits 106 and the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. The Six Rivers East, it's which co-op wants to win the conference, and right now it's Argyle Pecatonica at the top with a 4-0 conference record, 16-1 overall. Albany Monticello, 2-1 conference record against a 13-2 overall record. And then it's pretty much everyone else. Barneveld, Blackhawk, and Judah just hovering around the 500 mark. Well, for Barneveld and Blackhawk, Judah still looking to win their first game. But it feels like in the Six Rivers East, keep Argyle, Pecatonica, and Albany Monticello on opposite side of the brackets as far as you can, because it looks like those two are going to be on a collision course with some high-stakes basketball in the postseason.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really interesting when they play. They've won to this point, but it's going to be really interesting when they face up against Six Rivers West teams once the postseason starts, because they are all in the same half sectional. So I think if you put it down on paper right now, you would have to say that either Argyle Pecatonica or Albany Monticello is going to be a number 1 seed. It's going to be really interesting to see how the computer works with that one. And the other is going to be number 2 probably, and then you start factoring in Highland, Belmont, and actually probably Wazeeka Steuben also from the Ridge Valley.
Yeah, but speaking of Wazeeka Steuben, they are in first place with a 5-0 conference record in the Ridge Valley, 9-1 overall. And then right behind them, Kickapoo with a 4-2 conference record. Kickapoo's 12-5, and they reached the sectional round last year. They lost to Belmont in the sectional semifinal. So Wazeeka Steuben playing some very solid basketball. I don't know if this was necessarily a surprise, but I would say that it's kind of pleasant to see that Wazeeka Steuben back on the top of the conference after having a not so great season last year.
Well, most teams have to rebuild at some point, and Wazeeka Steuben was on a great run for a while, and they had a year that they had to reconfigure themselves, and now it looks like they're back with a vengeance. The problem, and I hate to beat a dead horse about this because we've talked about this in other sports, but Ridge and Valley teams, it's just difficult for them to face good enough competition non-conference, because they don't always face good competition within the conference. As a matter of fact, this year Weston is not playing varsity girls basketball. Their entire schedule is a JV schedule this year. So that is kind of messed things up for the other teams. But at this point in things, if you only have one loss, you're doing quite well, obviously. Although the other thing that's interesting, if my information is accurate here, they only have 10 games in. And I don't know if they replaced the games against Weston or not. So they may not be able to finish an entire schedule for that reason. And, the rest of the year is going to be quite interesting because if my limited math skills, I think they have 7 conference games left in their case, and other teams have 6 left. So race isn't over, certainly. But it seems like it's pretty obvious who's going to be near the top of the race, and that being obviously Wazeeka Steuben.
Yeah, Wazeeka Steuben does have a 2-game cushion, as things stand right now heading into Thursday's matchups. Wazeeka Steuben plays at North Crawford on Thursday night. North Crawford 2-4 conference-wise and 4-8 overall. Let's move into the Illinois side of things where the Galena Truther, Galena in first place, 2-0 conference record, 16-1. They take on East Dubuque on Wednesday night, which, this is going to drop after that game has been played. I'm not going to ask you to predict what's going to happen in the game that you'll be covering after this recording is done. But what do you think we'll be talking about as far as Galena and East Dubuque goes after they play on Wednesday evening?
Galena, Stockton, and East Dubuque are all tied for first right now. It's an unusual situation in the NUI West that actually the girls teams have played fewer conference games than the boys teams have. That's really obviously different. But those 3 teams are tied for first. Those 3 teams are playing each other this week because you got Galena against East Dubuque, and then Stockton is played Wednesday night. They played against River Ridge Scales Mound, which has had, they've been on a great run, and they'd be one of the best teams in the area, except for that little problem of having to play Galena all the time. And then Galena gets Stockton on Friday. So one way or another, we're going to see if Stockton and East Dubuque are for real as far as maybe challenging Galena for the conference title. But, Galena is number 2 in Class 1A. And for a reason. They played River Ridge Scales Mound Thursday night. And, we've all talked about the big 3 for the Pirates, Gracie Furlong and Eddie Hafel and Taylor Burcham. That game was actually close in the 4th quarter until an 8-0 run. None of the 3 players I mentioned scored during that run. They have freshmen and sophomores who are now also starting to contribute. And that's just bad news for everybody if that's the case. If all of a sudden, hey, who's this 13 kid? Oh no, she just hit 3. So that is the one that's going to be kind of interesting is they didn't play. Galena was supposed to play in that Byron tournament over Martin Luther King weekend. Well, guess what happened to that?
Right.
So I have not heard yet if they're going to attempt to reschedule that. I doubt that they're going to be able to schedule the whole thing and maybe none of it. So we'll have a little less of a test for the rest of the season, but we'll know at the end of this week, certainly, whether or not Galena's or any challenger to Galena is the real thing. The other thing is Galena also is that they play Pecatonica Saturday, and Pecatonica is a very good team also. I think they're 18-3, and they're leading another, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. I think it's the NUI North Division. So that's going to be a real big game for the Pirates also coming up Saturday night.
It should be interesting how that conference shakes out. And seeing East Dubuque play against Lancaster a couple weeks ago, East Dubuque's a very well coached team. The player that I have my eye on, or that I would have my eye on heading into that game Wednesday night, is Erica Dolan of East Dubuque. She's a very solid scorer. She can shoot pretty much from anywhere on the floor, and she's not afraid to take it to the basket and take on contact. She did have some foul trouble in the game against Lancaster, but if you look at the highlights from that game against the Flying Arrows, I'm sure had the foul trouble not happened, the outcome of that game might have been a little bit different. But when she's on the floor and she's playing well, East Dubuque does play quite well. Should be a fun one between Galena and East Dubuque. And we'll replay this discussion about it on our high school sports roundup next week to see just how right we were about Galena and East Dubuque. But we're at the halfway point of the season in girls basketball as well. Steve, biggest takeaway from the first half of the season from the girls teams that we've seen so far this season?
Well, I'm going to combine it a little bit because it's kind of interesting that this is the case, but there are a few towns where both teams, boys and girls teams, are playing very well. Galena is one of them. Platteville is one of them. Darlington is one of them. And Mineral Point is one of them. And I'm not quite sure what that is. Sometimes you have an athletic talent that isn't just on one side of a particular class. But it's been fun watching basketball in Platteville and Mineral Point and Darlington and Galena so far this season. We'll see if it keeps up.
Yeah, the thing that I kind of take away through the first half of the season is just the Six Rivers West. I don't know who's gonna come out with it. Highland and Belmont. Belmont has a reason to be one of the favorites to win the conference. They've returned so many players from the two teams that reach sectionals the last 2 years, but Highland, as you mentioned, hearing from some of the other coaches, Highland a bit of a dark horse maybe in the Six Rivers West, but the Highland girls, they're competitive in all sports. It's in both volleyball and softball as well. It seems to translate quite a bit on the basketball floor as well. River Ridge, that they're going to be solid defensively. Can the defense clamp down and hold those offenses of the other teams of the conference down a bit? And then that question mark is Schulzberg. We know that they've got some experience. Those girls have been starters as freshmen. Remember, Schulzberg didn't have a JV team for a couple seasons. They were it's been baptism by fire for those girls. And if they're healthy and they're able to to play, I think that they have a say in how this conference shakes out. And so many of the matchups coming up down the line, these head-to-heads they feel like coin flips, and I think the Six Rivers West is definitely the conference to watch and have our eye on, and how that's going to impact the seedings, especially in Division 5. So that's the big thing that I'm looking at. On the girls' side of things, again, our girls' basketball coverage in the upcoming week, coming on Thursday night, Prairie du Chien at Platteville on Extreme 107.1, and River Ridge at Belmont on Super Hits 106 and the Queen Bee Radio Sports YouTube channel. Then our next game will be on Tuesday, Cuba City at Mineral Point, the top two teams in the SWAL. Cuba City going to Mineral Point. We'll have that on Super Hits 106. And that will wrap up this week's edition of the Queen Bee Radio High School Sports Roundup. We'll have a brand new episode coming up next Thursday. For Steve Prestegard, I'm Tyler Diktanas. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you for another episode next week.